Okay, so now that we understand JSX, let's move on to another very important concepts in React, which is components in React. In React, a component is basically a reusable piece of user interface. Instead of writing the same UI code again and again, we can break the interface into small components and reuse them whenever needed. This makes our code cleaner and easier to read. Now, components can either be class components or functional components. Class components were used a lot in the past, but today functional components are more popular and recommended. Functional components are simpler, easier to understand, and work very well with modern React features like hooks. Now let us talk about the main characteristics of React components and why they are so useful when building applications. The first characteristic is reusability. A component can be created once and then used multiple times in different parts of the application. Components are modular. This means we can combine multiple small components together to build a large and more complex user interface. Components are modular. Each component focuses on small specific parts of user interface. Because of this, the application is divided into manageable pieces, which makes the code easier to understand and work. Another important characteristic is composability. This means we can combine multiple small components together to build large and more complex user interfaces. And finally, components are maintainable. Since each component has its own responsibility, updating or fixing one part of application become easier and does not affect the entire system. Now there are some rules for components as well. The first one is about naming the component. So the component's function name must always start with a capital letter so that it can differentiate it with a regular JavaScript function. And then as we discussed in our previous video that a component's function must return a valid JSX or null. And then whatever is returned, that must be wrapped by a div or a React fragment. Okay, so now let's jump to VS Code, and there we will write some code to understand components better. So this is the code from our last video. So we have this app.jsx, and then we have index.css file, and I have added some styles over here as well. And then we have app.css. So we really don't need this file, so we can delete it. We have now back in app.jsx file, we have this app function. And then I am returning this div. So now let's create another component. Let's create a button component, and then we will add that here. So for example, if I want to add a button over here which says learn more, then I can do it like this. Now let's see if our server is running. npm run dev. And if we go back to the browser, and in the browser, you can see we have this hello world, and then we have this button which says learn more. Now I need to create a new button component, so we can remove it from here and then create a component, a button component, so that we can reuse that button again and again in different places throughout our application. Let's remove it from here. Let's save the file. Now, in order to create a new component, we need to create a new file. We can call it button.jsx. So here, please notice that the B is capital. So this is a convention. So the component name must start with the capital letter. Then we can hit enter. And here we can create a function, a button function, just like we did the app function. So function button, and we can return a button like this, and here we can say learn more. Now I can add a class of btn. I have already the styles for this class in the index.css file. So here you can see I have this button class, and now we need to default export this button. So export default button. Let's save it, and let's go to the app.jsx file, and here we can import that button and use it. Let's import that. Import button dot slash. So we need to write the relative path. So that dot slash means it is inside of the same folder, the source folder. And here we can write the name of component, which is button. Let's save it. And here I can use the button component like this. Now we do not need to, we are not writing anything inside of this button. So now this button can be a self-closing because we do not need to write anything here. So we can remove this and make it a self-closing button like this. Now if we go to the browser and give it a refresh, and here you can see we have this button which says learn more with correct styling. Now we have created this button, and if we want, we can duplicate this and create another instance of this button. And if we want to make any changes, we just need to go to the component, and from there we can change it. So for example, instead of learn more, we can say get started. We can save it, and if we go to the browser, so here you can see we got 3 buttons with the same text of get started. So now you can see the real power of components. So you can see we have created this button component just once, and then we have used this 3 times, and now right now we are using it in the same component, in the same app component, which doesn't make sense. But as our application grows, we can use this button into different components. Now let's remove it. Let's create some more components so that we can better understand the idea of components. So I am going to create a simple page, and for that I need to create 3 more components. So there will be a header component, a footer component, and then a content component. So let's move on. Let's create a header component. And I can create a header function, but this time I am going to export default it. Okay, so I am going to create the header function. So function header, and here I am going to return a div, and inside of this it says header. Let's give it a class name of header also. So then we can export it, export default header. So instead of writing export default header at the bottom, we can directly write it over here as well. Export default function header like this. And let's create another component. Let's call it footer. Now, instead of creating the functional component that we used, now instead of creating a functional component like we did in header, I am going to create a class component so that you can see the difference between class and functional component. But as we discussed earlier, that class components are no longer used, and they are not recommended by the docs and the React community. So throughout this series, we will be sticking to functional components only. But as an example, I am going to create a class component for this footer. Now to create a class component, we need to import the component from React. Okay, and then we can say class footer extend component, and here we have a method which is called render. Okay, and here we can return a div with the text of footer, and let's also add a class of footer. Let's save it, and let's go back to the app.jsx, and here we have a div and this text. Now I am going to cut this text from here and then create a new component, and we are going to call that component content. A new component, let's call it content dot JSX. But instead of writing the component, what I am going to do is to create use a shortcut which is RFC. So if I write RFC and then press enter, so what this is going to do is that it gives me this boilerplate code to create a functional component with the same name as the name of this file. So in order to make this work, we need to add an extension. So if you want to have the same thing, you need to add an extension, and it is this one, ES7 plus React Redux React Native snippets. So you need to install this extension, and then you will be able to use this shortcut to create a functional component. So there are some other options as well, like this one, RFCE, React Functional Export Component, then some other options as well, but I am going to use RFC. Now I need to paste that content between this div. Let's save it. I am also going to give it a class name of section padding. Let's save it. Now back in the app.jsx file, let's save this file as well. So now we have created three different types of three different components: the header, the footer, and the content. And we are going to import all of those components over here in the app.jsx file. So I also noticed that we have this button import. So now we are not using the button, so I can remove it from here, and then I need to go to the content, and here, as you can see, we are using this button. So I am going to import that button over here like this, give it a save. So as I said earlier, back in the app.jsx, we are going to import all of those three components so we can create a web page, a simpler web page. So I am going to import the content from /content. Then I can import header from /header. And also I am going to import the footer. So import footer, but this is not working. So we need to make sure that we are exporting it. So here we need to say export default footer, and let's give it a save. And back in app.jsx, now I think we can import footer like this. Let's give it a save. And now we need to use all of those over here. So first there will be a header, a self-closing component, and then we can use the content, self-closing component, and then footer. So I think we do not need this div. So we can replace it with a fragment like this. Now we can give it a save, and then if we go to the browser and give it a refresh, so here you can see we have the header component at the top, then we have the content, and then we have the footer. So this is how we can make use of components to create reusable pieces of user interface. And once a component is created, we can reuse it. So we can use it again and again throughout our entire app. And if you want to make changes, if you want to make any changes, you just need to do them at a single place. So for example, if you want to have two different content components for some reason, you can do that too. So for example, for some reason, if you want to have two different content components, you can just copy it and then paste it and then save it. And if you go to the browser, you will notice that there will be two content components. So this is the first one and this is the second one. So you see how we can make use of components to create components that are reusable. And if you want to make any changes to them, you just need to update them in a single place, and then they will be updated wherever they are used. So this is it for this video, and I will see you in the next video.